Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the
I might sneak a little bit of this cup of noodles while we're going because I haven't finished
That's
my lunch,
all
so
right.
just disregard
Yeah.
it. Disregard
It's an
it.
Ethan Eats episode.
I'm gonna have some of my egg cream.
Oh,
God damn it, with the egg cream. He's
always
back.
an egg cream.
It's not always an egg cream, guys. It was cocoa one of the times. I had cocoa.
That's true. I looked up egg cream the other day. I was like, "What is this?" And look, it sounds good.
It's just it's a soda. It's a chocolate soda.
It is a chocolate soda.
I like a vanilla egg cream though. So this is the start of our
Chocolate
show.
soda?
Wow. Good
Oh
job,
no!
everybody.
Did we start already?
We did it again. We did the horrible opening again.
Yeah, we
we
should probably not have
start.
all that. Yeah, you should definitely cut everything we said before that. just to be safe.
All the horrible things you said weren't being taped. Just the weird stuff I said about enjoying chocolate soda. Griffin, you're going to start the show.
Yeah.
Matthew Rosenberg, welcome to another episode of Ideas Don't Bleed.
Welcome,
a podcast
Matthew.
You are a part of.
Yeah. I like to put you on the spot with that, Griffin, because you're both really good at it and also weirdly terrible at it. And it's like a beautiful thing.
That's our brand.
It's just whatever the day has presented me with, that's just usually how the podcast intro goes. It snowed for the first time today here in Michigan. I'm in
It's
a
never
shit
snowed
mood
in Michigan
because of
before?
it. Never ever.
That's
Can you believe it? So
amazing.
you would think I'd be like in awe.
You'd be
It's the first time I've
terrified.
seen
What's happening?
What is this?
Why-
Instead,
why?
I'm in a very poor mood, but I am very excited to be here with you, gentlemen, today for another episode of Ideas Don't Bleed, presented by Ashcan Press, where we talk about comic books, I think.
That's correct. That is correct.
Comic books
Cocoa?
and egg creams.
Yeah. We sometimes talk about egg creams. Everybody fast forwards through that. And not only do we talk about comic books with ourselves, where we talk over each other and say annoying, weird things, but also we have special guests. And today we
It's
have
true.
maybe our most special guest ever.
Is that true?
I don't know. I mean,
If we're not counting me and Ethan as guests, I think that could be true.
we are,
Possible.
we are not counting you as guests because you are the co-host and the producer of the show. So that's not what the word guest means. And our guest today is the wonderful Joshua Williamson.
Yay!
Yay. That's all.
Hello, how's everybody doing? Are you guys ever guests on other people's podcasts then? Like, you guys ever get
Occasionally.
invites where you're not producing it and you get to just have fun and talk and not worry about it afterward?
Occasionally.
We have a couple of times, and we're always like, yeah, we'd love to do that. We have no time because we're making so many
Yeah.
other podcasts.
Yeah.
So
I know. I feel like you do all of them now, right? Like, I think
Pretty
if there's a
much,
true.
podcast that somebody in comics is doing it, it's probably you.
I feel
We're
like
trying to get a hold of Conan O'Brien, but once we get him, it'll be everybody. Yeah.
everyone in comics.
I feel like you guys do a lot of podcasts, but the other ones are sort of just really practice for this one. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that? That's how you feel?
More or less.
Yeah.
This is what
more
we've
or
been
less.
building towards. Yeah.
Well, this is the fun one, right? This is the fun one.
Yeah.
Everyone else is
yeah, yeah.
brutal.
Stegman's one is work.
Yeah. Talking to Ryan Stegman is hard work. Talking to me is fun. The podcast is about comics, and that's mostly what we talk about. And so, just to go back to your question to the co-hosts, Josh, I've decided they're making a book, which we're not allowed to talk about on here. But when it comes out, I've decided that one of them will be the guest on the show, and the other will have to
I
host.
love it.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
But I'm not.
How do we
gonna-
decide which one?
Oh, you don't. I decide.
Okay,
which one.
that's all right.
Matt
It's gonna be.
decides.
You're gonna flip a coin, aren't you? You're just gonna be like,
No, I'm gonna see who says the meaner thing to me in email that week, because it's always it's a sort of coin toss of which one of them.
yeah. I
is
guess
gonna
I feel like a
make
secret
funny.
competition that they're not aware of,
Yeah,
Right,
I guess we
right?
just
Like
learned
it's some
that,
kind of
but-
secret competition they don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I point out really quick the distinct dichotomy between the shelves behind you two?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your point? Mine
just feel
actually
like-
has.
Is it reflective of anything, or
It's a reflective of a lot. Yeah. But
You have
mine
a
also.
plant.
I have a plant, and mine has books that
Yeah.
don't have pictures on them.
oh, shots fired.
I think somewhere in here there might be a book that doesn't have pictures. I think there's one over here somewhere. I don't have a plant in here. But I do have a pot that is supposed to be for a plant, but it's a Green Lantern. This is actually supposed to be a planter. Just so you know.
Sweet.
You just couldn't afford a plant.
Yeah. No, the
I
plant
have-
would die in here. Are you kidding me?
I have one of those, but it's Groot, and you're supposed to put a plant in him on the top of his head, but I never did.
God,
but
I love a comic book writer acting superior about reading novels. That's so funny.
I didn't say I read them. I
Yeah,
said they're in my bookshelf. Like,
But
let's
they
not,
are there.
let's
I
not
think I
judge
read
myself.
everything in here.
You've read everything.
I think I
in
read
there?
almost everything. If it's on a shelf, I probably read it. If it's on the ground, I haven't read it. And you can't tell because of this angle, but there are stacks of books around.
Yeah. I was gonna say I don't know a lot of people who like comic creators who don't have huge unread piles, but I guess they're getting it onto the shelf.
Oh yeah, I honestly thought you were gonna say that you don't really know a lot of comic creators that actually read comics, and I was gonna be like, oh, I partially agree with you.
I mean, yeah, it's a dark. The dark secret I have, and it took me years to get over it. And I normally wouldn't name his name, but I'll name his name. When I was coming up, I went up to Ivan Brandon and was like, "Hey, man, like I had a self-published thing," and I was like, "Can I give you this? I'm a fan of your stuff." And he went, "No, I don't read comics, man," and walked away.
God.
And I was so upset and so just like, well, fuck that guy, fuck him forever, like screw that guy. And I stormed off. And he, of course, stepped away and then came back to be like, of course, I'm just doing a bit. You can give me, but I'd already left. And so I spent 3 years or 4 years being like, I don't like that dude. And then we ended up at a dinner together. And I was like, he's really funny and nice and I like him fine. And now we're like, he's a buddy. And we were close enough that I was like, yeah, when I first met you, you did this thing. And I told him and he was mortified. He was like so upset. He was like, that was a bit, like that's a joke.
Oh, no.
And he was like, I can't believe you thought that for years. And I was like, yeah, I definitely did think that for years. But it turns out he does read comics. Just like
There
you
you
and
go.
me, Josh. Just like you.
I
and
like
me.
that story has a happy ending that he does read comics in the end,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is not
yeah.
yours. That was
No, he wouldn't read mine.
that was yeah.
He missed out on quite a terrible self-published comic by me, but that's
Oh, dude,
that's his
yeah,
loss.
my
it?
really early mini comics that I gave away to people at cons. I'm like, I hope to God they don't remember that. Like, I hope that they never looked at it. They were just like, oh, whatever, mini comic, and they have no connection. I've had people come to me at signings with some of that stuff, and I'm like, oh no, all right, yeah, okay. yeah.
That's how I am when people come to my signings with any comic I've written. I'm like, oh no, oh no, you didn't read
I
this,
have
did
to
you?
sign this now? But you don't like. Well, I don't know. I don't know if you want to talk about how much you don't like signings.
I like signing fine. It's a weird thing. It's a very weird part of our culture that
It is weird.
I didn't grow up. And
Yeah.
people, I mean, I'm in the middle of a signing tour. I've signed at 5 shops, 6 shops this week, and I have 11 to go in the next week. So
Oh my
like,
God.
yeah,
Sheesh.
we can talk about that.
That's a
another time.
lot, dude.
I'm aware.
Yeah,
Josh.
yeah,
Thank you.
You gotta
I
tell me
wasn't
that.
Do you want
dude.
to? Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
want to
sure
hear
if
how
that was
that's
a lot.
going.
Well, it's like James who hasn't been home in 3 weeks.
I know. Can't find it.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's like that. I'm sleeping in the passenger seat of a car and driving all night, and he's staying in Madrid for 7 days. So it's just like
No,
that.
it's
just
totally the same. It's totally the same.
the same.
Yeah,
He's in a
totally.
hotel in Madrid watching movies and then going out to really nice dinners. I forgot to eat one of the days because I had to move so much, and we didn't realize that until 2 a.m. and everything
I mean, it
was
still
closed.
sounds the same to me.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my point. It is the same. Moving on from me, let's start talking about you, Josh. That's why you're here. Unless
Yeah.
you really want to talk about me, but I bet you don't.
No, but we talk about me. What did I do? What do you want to know?
Let's start with the very basic. I like to do the questions that I always hate getting asked in interviews. I like to ask my friends those questions. So let's start with the very simple. Why comics, Josh?
Man. I mean, there's a serious answer and there's a joke answers, but there's this thing that Keith Giffen said, like somebody asked him that one time, and Keith Giffen his answer was, you act as if I had a choice. And that's how I feel about it sometimes, like when I was a little kid, my parents both read comics. So I've never lived where there wasn't like a short box in the house, What did they read? My dad was into Fantastic Four and Doom Patrol, but he also was really into like Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis comics and like Hot Stuff and like all of these older like Gold Key comics and stuff. So I grew up with like a very wide range of different kinds of books. And then my mom was mostly a DC person, so like Teen Titans, Supergirl, things like in that realm. And they actually gave me this book when I was a little kid. It's right here. This book is crazy. It's called The Great Comic Book Heroes, and it's so here it is. You can see this book here, right?
That's awesome.
This book is weird because it's this collection of like Golden Age characters, right? But it has Marvel, DC, and like the Spirit in it, and it's reprints of all their origins with a lot of information about those characters. It's one of the only times you'll find a book like this that has actual reprints of Marvel and DC plus other stuff. And so I've just always kind of grown up around comics. And I think once I found out in the third grade that this was something you could do for a living, that was like you could make comics and get paid for it. It was around third grade.
How'd you find that out?
I feel like it had to have been, I think maybe it was like more like fourth grade. I think it was just Wizard. Just buying Wizard and reading Wizard.
A Wizard told you that. That's cool.
Yeah. I was really into Wizard though. I mean, Oh, hey, Wizard? No. So, Matt, back in the day, there was a magazine called Wizard.
Not familiar. Yeah.
But I would pick up Wizard, and I started going to conventions, and at first when I started going to the conventions, it was just as a fan, and obviously I know people made them, but it was like once you started figuring this stuff out, I was like, oh, I want to do this, and so pretty much from then on, it was like that was it. There was by the time I got to high school, I had two options that I wanted to do, which we'll probably have talking about at some point here. But it was like I wanted to either make comic books or I wanted to be an Imagineer. Like I either wanted to build parks and work at like design theme parks and rides and basically experiences, or make comic books. That was the path in high school I was on and doing research and figuring them out. And but I just loved comics. Like I was writing my own little fan fiction. I had all this like X-Men fan fiction, like all this stuff I was working on when I was in like middle school. I developed an entire video game system for New Warriors. I had a whole system. The game would be based on the first 50 issues of the comic book. I was a nut with that stuff. And then when I was in high school,
would anyone be anybody other than Nova? Like, why would you be Night Thrasher in the New World?
I was about to say Night Thrasher
is cool. Night Thrasher's cool.
He's super cool.
Night Thrasher?
No, I fucking love Night Thrasher, but if I'm putting a quarter in to play, I don't want to play for 7 seconds. I want to play for like.
Well, no, this isn't an arcade game. This was like a massive RPG, so you would have like multiple of the characters, right? So it was like you would have Nova, you would have Namora, you'd have Night Thrasher. Anyway, listen, if you want, I still have the notebook for it, and I can bust out the whole gameplay. We can talk about it. But all right, so
later on.
So I was really, just trying to figure out the different stuff I wanted to do. And then one day we had one of those like college fairs at my high school. And there was this giant poster Jeff Matsuda had drawn of Wolverine. They had this company. They were like, we have a comic book program at this college. It was a graphic design school, but they had a comic book program, and they had teachers that had worked in comics. They had internships that would go to like Top Cow and to Wildstorm, and at the time they would go to like Awesome Comics. And so I was like, hell yeah, I am doing this. I'm signing up for this. I toured the school. I got there on my very first day. I actually got there really late, and I missed orientation. I missed everything, and I was moving in the dorms, and it's weird because you're going to a new college, like you don't know anybody, Right. And so I get there and I'm in the dorms, and because I got there late, there was a whole problem in my room. There was all kinds of stuff, and they were like, "Well, we don't have a room for you, so you're gonna crash in these guys' room for the weekend. These guys were like best friends, and that was the whole thing. They were like, no, this is our room, and all of a sudden I'm gonna crash in their room for the weekend. And but we're like, listen, it's all right because we're gonna be gone this weekend. We're not actually coming back until Monday. And this is on like a Thursday night, so they're like, you can have it until Sunday, and then you got to get out of here. And the only comic book I had on me was a copy of Watchmen. Like I had this like beaten up Watchmen trade. It was the only comic I had. And I went to get fast food, whatever. And it was just a weird situation. And it felt like the school was just so quiet and there wasn't anybody there. And so I go into my room and I'm reading the comic and eating fast food or whatever. And then all of a sudden the door flies open, just out of nowhere flies open. And there are these two guys standing there. Not the guys who was their room, totally two different guys. And they had my keys. And one of them was the RA, and he was like, yo, you left your keys in the door, dummy. Like, don't do that. You know, he threw the keys at me. And the other guy was like, whoa. You're reading Watchmen? And I was like, yeah, I read it before. But then, of course, I was like, and this is the thing. When I was in high school, I only knew one person that read comics.
Yeah.
You know, I think I told you this story. I told you this story before about how I didn't tell anybody I read comics.
Yeah.
I worked at a comic book store in high school. Yeah. Okay. So
I'm saying I didn't like once I grew out of wearing an X-Men shirt and like when I didn't talk about comics, I didn't know anybody who read comics.
I told you this, right? That when I was in high school, that my girlfriend at the time came into the comic book store I was working at. Oh no! So I'm at work. I'm at work on a Saturday. It's my birthday. It's my 18th birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm at work at the comic book store. Thank you. And I am normally I would wear contacts, but I was wearing my glasses. I was wearing jean shorts and a bright purple Gambit shirt.
Oh hell yeah!
And I saw we were in a mall, and so I could look out. You know, people were walking through the mall, and I swear I saw my grandma, and I was like, "Why is my grandma here?" And then I saw my girlfriend, and she was dressed really nice, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is a surprise birthday party." Please tell me it's just her and my family and not all my friends from high school, because I'm wearing a bright purple Gambit shirt, and this is it. Like, my secret is out. And sure enough, I walked in. She took me to this restaurant, and I walked into the restaurant, and I went to high school there. And there was a lot of questions like, you work at a comic book store? Like, all these questions was a whole thing. Anyway, so when these two guys were like, yo, you read like you're reading Watchmen, I'm like, you guys like comic books? I was so excited. And they were like, come with us, and they took me to like the rec room, and it was just wall-to-wall comic projects that they had been doing.
Let's go.
Wow.
And so it was like all this art, all this stuff. They had made mobiles of different, like, stuff that you would look like it would be in a comic book store. They were just making them for fun.
Wow.
And they had them up on the ceiling. They had all of this stuff they've been doing comic book projects. And so those two guys were getting ready to graduate. They weren't that far off from graduating, but they were like, yo, like, come and hang out with us. And I met a ton of comic book artists. That school totally lied. There were so many problems with it. Like, Jeff Matsudo had nothing to do with that school whatsoever. I talked to him about it later. Good laugh between the two of us. Only one teacher there had actually worked in comics, and he had worked at a heavy metal magazine.
Awesome.
All the internships had been canceled because the students had been basically fuck-ups. And so basically Top Cow was like, never again, Wildstorm, all of them were like, no. But it was interesting because there were people that kind of knew. It was an interesting time because, like, everyone I knew that I was hanging out with, they also knew other comic book creators because of that, and just the system of it all. And so we just started, learning how to make comic books from that, and just hanging out with a lot of comic book people. So I kind of got thrown in, but I only knew artists for a really long time. I didn't really talk to writers for a while. It was mostly just the artists and learning how to do production. But yeah, I just really I think it was just this domino thing of like, this is the path I'm on. And it was like, and I loved it. And I really like making the books. I like telling stories, and I love the visual medium. Like, I feel like I'm a very visual person. So it's like, it all just kind of comes together. And I wouldn't even know, again, it's like, I say most days I'm like, I don't know what I'd be doing differently. But I do know what I'd be doing differently. I would have tried to go be an Imagineer, which is a whole other, much harder and job and very competitive.
Sure.
Not to say comics aren't competitive, but that's a whole other piece, because there's only so many places you can work for. It's not like you can because in comic books you can go an independent route, right? Like, we can do a lot of self-publishing. There's no self-publishing really for
no freelance building rides. You can't just go down.
Yeah, developing a whole amusement park. I mean, I think about it every day though. It's still like I still have moments where it's the same thing with comics where it's like, oh, if I have this meeting, I'm ready to pitch. Like, if I ever was in a room with like anyone who worked for Disney or worked for any kind of theme park, I'm like, yo, I got ideas. Let's go. I got all kinds of thoughts on stuff. That's kind of, Hank Canals is actually one of the reasons why I knew Hank Canals, but got along with Hank Canals, is that when he came back to Warner Brothers at one point, he worked in experiences and amusement park stuff before he went to Wildstorm and before he worked with DC. Anyway, that's sort of a long answer to your question of why comic books, but I just love them too. Like, I've been reading them this whole time, and I just think they're magical. I just really love them. Yeah,
that's a good answer, Josh. Thank you.
And I was collecting them too.
We're probably going to cut out everything before. I just love them. We'll just leave that.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I try to maintain that perspective. I worked at a comic book store all through high school and then part of college, and so I don't know. I think that's a lot when I'm putting together a project or talking to people about it, is that like try to take yourself out of the work experience for a minute and remember why you love it and why you're actually like what you would like of this, what would get you pumped up, and the different pieces. Because I like reading it, but I also like collecting them and stuff. But yeah.
Do your parents read your stuff?
I don't think my mom does. My dad, for a while early on, I think he might read, but for a minute there, my dad has a deal with Things from Another World where any book that I work on, they mail to him. When I was first starting out, I imagine that was fine. He probably was like, he would actually frame them. Every issue that came, he would frame it. Right? That is impossible now. Yeah, that is impossible now. But they still mail him the stuff, and then he has boxes of it. I don't think he reads it anymore.
When my first Marvel one-shot came out, I wrote a Quake one-shot with Daniel Warren Johnson. And when that came out, my mom, there's a comic shop by her house, and she went to it. And she went in and she bought like 2 copies of the Quake one-shot. And at the register, she was like, my son wrote this. And the clerk was like, oh, yeah? Quake kind of sucks. He's gonna write one of the people from S.H.I.E.L.D. He should have written, and then he just started going through different S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who would have been cooler to write the Quake. And my mom left and called me from the parking lot and was like, "Why did that happen to me? Like, what?" and from then I was like, "Mom, I'll just bring you books. You don't have to go and get like the
and also don't talk to them. Don't tell them you know me.
Don't tell them you know me. Don't do that."
She really got a comic shop experience. Holy shit.
Yeah.
It was pretty great. And then I started just bringing her everything. And then at a certain point, I feel like she never said it because she's very sweet. But I think there was a certain point where she was like, you can stop now. Like, you're making a lot of stuff and I don't need, like, it was never said because my mom was way too sweet for that. But there was definitely a sort of implication of like, what am I supposed to do with all of this? And I don't have an answer for that. So I just...
Well, that's the thing is, I'm kind of like, yo, they give us comps. If you need a copy, like don't spend the money on that. But yeah,
they don't all give us comps, but some of them do.
That's true. Yeah.
Have you ever told your mom that she could CGC slab those and then we could auction them off on Whatnot?
My mom loves to CGC,
and you could sign them too.
But mostly what she's
signed CGC slab
is like stuff she knits, stuff she's big into weaving. So she's weaving. She's on weaving CGC, which is a totally different feel.
Right.
This is a Matt Rosenberg's mom original knitted variant cover for What's the Furthest Place from Here #1, signed 9.7.
Yeah, you can't really get more than that because it's yarn. And
I feel like all of this should happen. You should definitely figure out how to make this work because you'll tap into some whole new market with Whatnot.
No, it's great. And it'll only take my mom 2 months to knit a cover to a comic book and working in horrible conditions. So I think this is a great idea. Getting back to you and away from my mom, Josh, as you know, I like to keep you two apart. Well, early on in your career, you're doing stuff like Sketch Monsters and Dear Dracula, and like skewing very YA and even below YA, like little kid stuff. And then you just fast forward a little bit and you're doing Nailbiter and stuff. And I'm sort of
Yeah.
wondering why? Like, why did you start off doing a lot of kid stuff before you had kids?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a complicated answer. Well, there's multiple reasons for why I started doing the YA kid stuff. My best friend, and both of my closest friends, their art styles kind of lean to that. You know, they kind of lean toward a more, I guess, YA kid style. And so, you know, obviously, like with the artist on Sketch Monsters and Dear Dracula, you know, that like he was my roommate for a long time. You know, so it's like, let's make a comic book. You know, and he was one of the first people I met when I moved into the dorms in college too. So we just know each other for a long time, but his art style definitely leans toward that. So that's part of why. There was also some commercial aspects to it. The idea that like it felt at the time like that was the direction certain things were going. So there was a lot of like, you could tell. I mean, this is how it always is, right? The publishers are always talking about they want more YA, they want a younger audience, and so we were kind of like, well, I'm gonna start heading that direction. And there was also at the time there was this thing at Marvel. It was Marvel Adventures books they were doing, you know, and those books were a lot more like geared toward a younger audience. So at that time, so it's in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, right? So like in some ways it was a good thing because I was like, yes, like I actually enjoyed making those books. Like I like making Sketch Monsters, I like making Dear Dracula, and I'm working with my friends to make them, so we're having a good time, you know. There was also that part of me that was like a little bit mercenary and a little bit mimicky of like, oh, well, Marvel is hiring people that do kind of a younger audience to do these Marvel Adventure books, but that's also the doorway into Marvel, right? So if I could show I can do that, you know, I can get those kinds of jobs, right? Like I can get in at Marvel if I can show I can write toward a younger audience. Those books were intended for a younger audience, but I actually wasn't happy about it, you know. And it was in that zone where I think I was always trying to be the guy that was like, I could mimic someone else's style, or I could like just do the job that needed to be done. You know, it's the same way. Like in some ways, it helped me out in some places. You know, like I understood what those books needed to be, but I was like a Vertigo person. You know, like that was me as a kid, like in high school and in college. It was like I wanted to make books that were like Vertigo books. You know, like, you know, Preacher was one of my favorite comics of all time. I really loved Starman. Like, you know, that was the direction I felt like I should have been going in, and I wasn't. You know, like, you know, I look at a lot of stuff that Brubaker does, and I love Brubaker. So it's like that's the direction I should have been going in. But I felt like, I was in this weird spot where I felt like I was waiting for permission to do those kinds of books. And I was like, oh, but then this is the way to get in. This is to do these YA books. That's the doorway in.
Right.
And so when I was at DC, for a few years, like doing little things here and there, like a mini or a one shot. And yeah, I would do like a simple thing every once in a while for Marvel. But from like 2009, 2012, I was in that zone where I was like, yeah, I'll do anything for a job. That was part of it. But I was also leaning into like, oh, well, this is the direction things are going. It's this like kind of YA stuff. So I'll do that, even though it isn't what I want to write. And then when DC sort of was like, yeah, we're done with you in 2012, like I remember leaving I was in the building. It was the Monday after New York Comic Con, and it was the first time I didn't have any work at DC in 3 years. Like not even like a one shot or a you know, here's like an 8-pager that you know is coming kind of thing for an anthology. It was like it was done. I told this story a few different times, but I remember Bob Harris and I was leaving the building, and I ran to Bob Harris as I was leaving, and Bob was like, "Oh, well, let me walk you out," and I was like, "Cool." And then when we got to the street, and Bob pat me on the back and was like, "Good luck, kid." And I remember being like, oh, dude, I just got fired. Like, it's over, you know? And then I had this moment where, so it's like October of 2012. Okay, yeah, so it's like just over 10 years ago. I was like, oh, shit, I am out of work. Like, I have no work in this industry, nothing. I had, like, a couple little things maybe gonna happen. Like, I was maybe going to submit to our court, maybe something in Image. But it was like, oh, dude, I'm done. That's it. I'm out. Yeah. And I remember it was almost like liberating in some ways, because it was like the worst case scenario of like, I am broke and I'm out of work. And I feel like I just fucked up my entire career. Yeah. So I'm kind of out. And I think because I felt that like liberated feeling, it allowed me to kind of like stop waiting for permission to make the books I wanted to make. So that's where like Ghosted, Birthright, Nailbiter, that all came from that time period where I kind of got away from it. But so I was going to be broke, and so I was like, okay, whatever jobs can I get? And thankfully I had like some royalty checks come in and a couple little jobs come in that I'm like, okay, this is going to hold me over. I'm going to make it. I'll be fine. And then years earlier, again, because of the YA space, I would do these jobs for DC that were like these custom publishing jobs. And that's very much like a YA space, like not YA, but it's very much like a mass market space, right? Sure. So there are rules involved. And one of the jobs I did was this General Mills comic that was like a comic book that would go in cereal boxes. And I did one of those, but there were a lot of those, like, and other people would do them. And for whatever reason, I was the one that I think got it the most. I mean, they told me this, like, I got it the most. And like somebody else did theirs where there were like severed heads in it and stuff. And they're like, what are you doing? This is for kids, Like they just didn't understand. And but for whatever reason, like, I got it. Like I understood what the book needed to be. They were really easy to write because it's like, they couldn't be more than 3 panels per page. Yeah. It's still work, but it's not like as intensive. There's the limitations make it almost easier in some places. And then I got this call and they're like, oh, we want you to do, because you did so well in the last round, General Mills, we want you to do it again. And I was like, oh, cool. Can I do more than one? And they were like, oh, no, you don't understand. We want you to do all of them. It's 4 of them and you have to do it all in 1 month. And I was like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. So I basically wrote one a week for 4 weeks in a row and turned them in. And the money from that, because it was like a really good paycheck because it was for custom publishing, it was for the serial. It was a different kind of job. The money from that actually sort of like set me up. Right. So then I had a lot of things going well for me where it was like, now I feel this like freedom to be myself, right? To be more of like, these are the kind of books I actually want to make. And I had learned a lot of hard lessons. And that's where I learned the lesson of like, I should want to buy my own book because if I don't want to buy it, that's a problem. Like I would want to read this. And so I felt a lot of like freedom of like, oh, my dream is to work for DC Comics and that will never happen again. So I guess I'm totally free now to kind of do whatever I want. I felt like I had some financial support from that job. And then it was just off to the races. And that is, again, where Ghosted, Birthright, Nailbiter, all that stuff came in. But it's like, I'm glad I did that YA sort of stuff before, and I did enjoy it. But that's why the hard turn at one point just sort of hits, like in 2012, where it was just like this big flip into like, well, no, this is what makes me happy, so I should head that direction. But I'm still thankful I did that stuff.
So a lot of the career stuff now you owe to like Fruity Yummy Mummy and like Count Chocula and those guys are really Booberry.
Yeah, very much so.
I actually don't know if those are General Mills, right?
I mean, I don't even know, but
what were those stories? Yeah,
DC characters.
Oh man, yeah, it was like I had one where Cyborg went to Apocalypse and had like an adventure, and like Desaad and Darkseid kidnapped him. I had one where the
Rice
Penguin.
Krispie elves.
I was gonna say, do they have to team up with the cereal mascots?
It was literally. This is why it was so easy, because it was like take 2 characters, and just have them on an adventure together. That was it. So like one of them I did. I think it was
Cyborg,
the very first
Tony the Tiger.
No, but that's it. It was like, dude, that's what was fun about it. There was no connection to cereal at all. There was not even an appearance of a cereal box. It was like the Penguin steals an artifact from Atlantis, and so Batman has to go to Atlantis and team up with Aquaman to stop Penguin, and then Ocean Master gets involved. It was like real simple. I guess I would say it was like writing episodes of Justice League Unlimited. That's the best way to explain it. There was no cereal. So even when you look at it, and what's a lot of the artists I work with in that time period, so like Bruno Redondo, like a lot of those guys I ended up working with much later on stuff, or now have like kind of blown up. And no cereal boxes were involved at all.
Do people ever bring you those to sign?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they do.
That's so cool.
It is pretty fun.
That's really cool.
Because the only way you can get those, well, I guess you can get them on eBay now. But those weren't sold in stores, and they've never collected them. Those aren't available. They're not digital. They're not collectible. So if someone has one, they either bought on eBay or they got out of that cereal box like 10 years ago. It was like one of the.
Did anybody did any of them discover you from that? Like, did they go like, this is where I first saw you? So when I saw you on something else, I was like, it's the cereal guy.
I don't think so. That'd be fun. I will say I did a custom job. Okay, so if you want to talk about the custom stuff, I did this custom job back in. It was the one of the. I can't remember what year this was. It might have been that year. It might have been 2012. It was for tools. Mm-hmm. It was a thing about tools of like craftsman like power drills, if I remember this correctly. And so they had a mascot. And so I had that mascot as the hero who saves the Justice League using tools to save him. Mm-hmm. Oddly, that comic book, yes, I've had people be like, I love this thing.
Wow.
And this is how I discovered you. Like, yeah, that has happened. On that one particularly. But I've had people come to me at cons.
Before I was just a tools guy. This made me fall in love with comics.
I like comic books too. Yeah. Hey, that's always the goal. Yeah. No, I've had people come to me at signings and stuff. And actually, I've had people come to me and be like, they'll bring me a copy of Nailbiter, right? And so I'm signing Nailbiter, and they'll look at the table and they'll be like, wait, you do these books too? And I'm like, yes. And like, I had no idea, but I read all these books. And they have no idea it's the same person. Yeah, I've had that a few times where someone's like, I love Ghosted, I have no Nailbiter. I did not know they were both written by you.
I find that so strange when people don't pay attention to creators. I don't get
it. It's really common.
It's every
I know. It's so weird.
Yeah. Stegman has spoken quite a bit to the fact of recently, since they promoted Vanish for like a full year before it came out, and then it came out and we went to New York and people were coming up and being like, dude, I love Venom so much. When are you going to make another comic book? And he's like, it's out. It's here. Yeah. I am holding it in my hands. You can read it now. They're like, what is Vanish?
It's bizarre.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation about what people pay attention to.
Looks like General Mills presents Justice League Breakout number 1 through 4.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
By Josh Williamson.
How much is that?
2011.
How's that going? How much is that going for on eBay? Is that on eBay? Are you on eBay?
I'm not on eBay. I'm on DC Database.
Oh, DC Database.
Yeah, that stuff was fun to do, and I'm thankful I did it. But that's where the like hard turn from. Now I'm writing about serial killers. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, look at that!
Serial.
Yeah.
Genius.
Genius.
As pleased with that.
How many writers need to be on a fucking StreamYard to come up with a fucking serial related?
Yeah, Josh was definitely bummed we did that.
I think we talk about some Substack stuff, some Dark Ride stuff.
Yeah.
Good transition into that. Maybe
we're gonna fast forward over the your record-breaking run on the Flash. That's not really important. That's not what we talk about here. We don't need to talk about the fact that you read over 100 issues of the Flash.
Oh, you're the Flash
guy.
Right. Okay.
I have talked about. I have talked about Flash a lot. I forget I wrote sometimes.
You talk about the Flash in your excellent newsletter, which I texted you and cursed you out about because you put part of it behind a paywall, and I was so frustrated reading a very good story about the Flash that you then just were like, if you want to know the rest, pay me. And I was texted you something something along the lines of, what the fuck, Josh?
And well, I like a good cliffhanger, and I was very happy. That was very satisfying on my end because I like cliffhangers, and for you to have that reaction, I was like, yes, this is what I want. Yes. And then here's your free account.
And then you gave it to me for free, and it was beautiful, and I like the end of the story too.
And now you get to read the monthly me talking about the Flash again, monthly thing. Yeah,
which I encourage everyone to do. Even I actually really love it. Even I would encourage people to read it even if they don't read the Flash or didn't read your run, because there's so much stuff that's like about your creative process, your thought process, and the behind the scenes stuff that I think is so insightful in a way that we don't get. That's very like personal and reflective and smart. I really love it. It's really one of my favorite newsletter things.
Josh, how have you been enjoying the Substack space? You're doing stuff a little bit differently, I feel like, than some of the other creators.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's I say it's interesting. I really like it. I like being able to kind of just have this thing. It's twice a week, just post stuff in there. And I've always struggled with like, I don't mind talking about myself on a podcast. I think writing about myself is, and especially on the internet, and not really, I don't like sharing too much of myself out there, but I think Matt and I talked about this before, that like my favorite way of doing interviews or talking to people is on podcasts or video casts. Like I prefer that over anything else. So the idea about like writing about myself is always something I've kind of like hesitated to do. And so with this one, was one of the original things with Substack we started talking about was it was an opportunity to do that a little bit more. And so I actually really enjoy that. And I just enjoy kind of approaching it a little differently. But I also saw what everyone was doing for a whole year before I really launched. I mean, I had a plan from the very beginning and I haven't deviated from that plan too much. But just watching what everyone was doing, it kind of helped me shape what I wanted to do with it and how I did want it to be a little different, and but yeah, I really actually enjoy it. It is kind of fun figuring out what the other, because I'm always like, well, one is going to be promo stuff, and then there's the Nailbiter posts, and then it's going to be like, well, what are the things that are a little more personal going to be about? What are the kind of, behind the scenes stuff? And I have a lot of stuff planned that I want to talk about and get into on there. And I think, especially once you get to the new year, I'm going to probably open up a little bit more about some process stuff and stuff that I think about with comics that I would like to write about a little bit. It is interesting. Like, I remember when I first started, I would watch what James was doing and I would be like, Jesus Christ, James, you're writing way too much. Like, what are you doing? I'd be like, you can take this and break it into like 5 posts and do a post every day, But then once I started going, I was like, oh shit, I get it now. Because once you start writing, you're like, oh, you end up writing a lot. Like, it ends up being a bigger, and then I understood a lot more of like why James wrote that much, So, but now I'm like, well, now I start thinking about it. I'm like, oh, cool. I want to do this post, but I'll make sure I have it done correctly and do this. But yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's funny because I have we like you said, we've talked about this a lot, but like I have a real, like, I don't want to talk about myself. I don't want to talk about my work particularly. I feel real weird and self-conscious about it. And so like, that's why this podcast exists. So I could be like, well, I'm posting about other people and talking about other people. And like, it's a good avenue for me to like not be talking about myself. And ironically, then I talk too much on my own podcast and sort of blow that up. But like, yeah, I like the idea of like sort of not divulging a lot. And so for me, it's fun just because it's like sort of getting out of a safe space a little bit. It's leaving my comfort zone, like doing this and doing the newsletter where I have to be like, well, here's my thoughts on some stuff. And here's like I don't like showing process stuff. I don't like telling people like what the ingredients are in the food they're eating. Like I'd rather you just be like, this is magical. I have no idea how they did it. If at the end of the day I'm like, I kind of just ripped off this stuff and put a new coat of paint on it, it's like, it ruins it. And so I have to find an artful way to be like, yeah, we're all just stealing stuff, and it's not really that impressive. So like, yeah, I get that, but also like you said, the inclination once you start writing to just be like, especially because I have to do the promo stuff and I have to be like, oh, there's a new issue of DC versus Vampires. There's a new issue. What's the first place from here?
Yeah.
Then I want to be like, I don't want to just email people every week, like, go buy this thing I made. Like that's a leaflet. That's a promotional flyer. Like that sucks to just send that to people. So I have to be like giving them more and opening up more. And it's a fun, weird challenge for sure. But I think you do it really well. I really like reading your newsletter.
This week I was thinking about that because originally my post this week was going to be like on Monday, it was going to be like, here's the Dark Crisis 7 FOC, right? And I didn't, like we were saying, I didn't want to just be like, here's the covers, Yeah. And I started talking about our house getting remodeled, which I was talking to you guys before, and Matt, we talked a little bit, offline, but like a big part of my house is being remodeled, and it's been pretty intense. And like watching at first, at the very beginning, they do a lot of demo. And so having somebody come in and just watch them like destroy part of your house was like a weird feeling, It's like, I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and we asked them to do this, but there was something very like, I'm not sure what the right word is for it, but just very like alarming. I'm not sure. It was just very like, this is weird, to watch someone just demolish and destroy part of your house, but for a whole week they were doing that. They were destroying part of my house, and then now they're just building. Right. And they're just building and they're making stuff. And it's really kind of interesting to watch them do. And so when I was looking at the podcast, or not the podcast, sorry, the Substack post this week, I was like, I should talk about this. I should talk about how they're destroying part of my house and they're building, they're now in the building stages. Everything they're doing is all building. And so when I started writing about that and writing about how it was very weird, but there's something really cool now that like, now it's all about building. Right. And, all day long in my office, I can hear them building, right? It's so loud, but I can hear it. And at this point, it's become like the soundtrack of my life. It's construction sounds. But as I started writing about that, all of a sudden I started being like, oh man, did I just like stumble into a segue into Dark Crisis? Like literally as I'm writing it, I'm like, I really like watching people build things. And then I was like, and Dark Crisis is about building things. And I was like, oh my God, like totally by accident was like, by writing about this thing, I started writing about Dark Crisis. And then I'm like, by the way, FOC is here. It was totally by like just complete accident as I was writing, and I was very proud of myself. But that's the way you want to go, right? Like you want to be a little bit personal on top of the like, oh, here's my promo thing. Anyway, we can talk about this stuff. Let's talk about this.
And then the other stuff you're doing on your Substack is you're doing comic stuff there.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some different things, but the thing we've announced so far is that we're doing Nailbiter short stories. You know, Mike and I, for a long time, have wanted to get back to that world. You know, in the world of Nailbiter, there are 16 serial killers who are all born in the same small town. But the one that we mostly live with is Warren, the Nailbiter. That's the one we spend the most time with. We've always wanted to flesh out the rest of them and do more with them. So then we were like, oh, let's actually do that. Like, let's do shorts. And so I'm writing some. Mike is writing some. We're going to have a couple other guest writers, all people who are like brand new, who've like really never written comics before, we're talking to. And, you know, so they're going to write a few, and then we've got different artists. Each one will be about a different one of the serial killers.
Awesome.
Sometimes I want to break that mold and just write about Warren, the Nailbiter, or one of their characters, but I want to make sure we cover at least the other 15 first, and then we'll eventually collect that in like a nice trade paperback that collects all of it. And it's called you know, terrifying tales from the Nailbiter and other stories. I think that's what it is. Yeah, to us it's always been Nailbiter tales. Like we've just always called it that internally. You know, Mike and I've been thinking about it for a long time, and this gave us an opportunity to do that. And then with that, we're able to, you know, we were making these like Nailbiter fan club boxes that have like collectible cards in them and pins and T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And it's been pretty cool to kind of get into that space because I love collectible stuff too, and so I kind of wanted to use Substack to offer some of those. And but yeah, it's been really fun to kind of play in that area. Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our discussion with Joshua Williamson. Make sure to check out Dark Ride as well as everything else Josh is working on by visiting his Substack, Joshua Williamson's super scary newsletter, at joshuawilliamson.substack.com. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week for part 2 of our discussion, and in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com, or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at Ashcan Press on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.